Wardrobe furnishings for Retro Game Lounge provided by 80stees.com. For all of your rad retro shirt needs, check out 80stees.com. What's up, everybody? Jimbo and
Mark the Game Shark here.
Back again, and we've got a kind of a topical video, like a bit of a nostalgia video that we thought we would kind of share with you guys and just talk about something that I'm sure a lot of you guys grew up with the same way as we did. And that would be full motion video games. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, we, Mark and I were young kind of in the heyday of FMV games when it was like all the rage and everybody was swearing up and down it was the future and all this stuff. I mean, like, because when you think about it, like, we basically went from, like, in one generation, went from, like, Super Mario World to, like, movies being in video games, like actual full motion video. Like, that was, like, from A to B. Yeah. And that's a huge jump. You know, from little drawn sprites to actual actors being in video games. That was, like, mind-blowing. Yeah. You know, the first time you saw that, you're like, holy crap.
It looked like super realistic.
Yeah, like at the time we're just like, this is amazing. Like, this is so far beyond video games. But we thought we would share with you, to start with, kind of our first, each of our first respective exposures to full motion video games. If you don't mind if I go first?
Sure.
Okay. Well, mine is definitely something that's, it's going to be a blast from the past one. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to remember this. It's something you actually mentioned earlier, and that's why I didn't say anything. That would be Time Traveler, the Sega Video 3D hologram game, which is technically a full motion video game because they shot that like a movie.
Yeah.
And I was looking into, because I'm an arcade collector, as a lot of you guys know, and I was looking into like the technology of how they made it work. It wasn't a true hologram. It was basically just an optical illusion, where it had, the TV was actually like, if this is the coin slot where you're facing it, the TV was down here and it was facing this way and it was hitting a curved lens that basically came up into this little convex shaped thing that gave it the illusion of being a hologram. But all it really is it's a lens into a curved projector. So it's really just tricking your eyes into thinking it's a hologram when it's really not. I mean, it's a freaking amazing trick, don't get me wrong. I mean, remember the first time you saw that?
Oh yeah,
it was like,
blown away.
It was the coolest fucking thing you'd ever seen. You're like, holy shit, you know, I mean, and it was like 75 cents to play it, and you're like, there's a line to get to it, and you're looking at it, and you're just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I remember like seeing that for the first time. Big white cabinet, dude, big thick thing, like a dome. Wasn't really tall, it was just really wide, and it actually used laser discs, much like Dragon's Lair. That's how they got the video stuff on there, so there was a laserdisc player in there. And I didn't know this until I looked into this recently, but that cabinet, they actually made another game. Time Traveler wasn't the only game. There was another one called Holosseum. I didn't know that. The cabinet looks the exact same as Time Traveler. I think they just changed the marquee, and they probably sold this to arcade owners as simple as like they'll ship them the new Laserdisc and a new marquee, so it's basically just a kit. And instead of full motion video, it was like hand animated video, but it was like a fighting game.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
So like you could fight, you know, but you only had like a selection of like 4 characters, and I mean, it looked okay. It was still holographic and stuff like that, and you do like little fights, and the play controls were a little bit better than Time Traveler, which, we'll be honest, were kind of clunky because it wasn't really a video game. It was a bunch of QuickTime events. Yeah. That's literally all. It was just like Dragon's Lair. Like, it's not, you're just involved in the story, kind of guiding it. You're not like controlling it.
Yeah. From what I remember, that was tough.
That was. So Time Traveler was legit hard. I could never get past the wizard. Yeah. Because like you do that and he'd disappear, and you do that and he'd disappear, and yeah, he'd always get me in the end. You know, because it was all just reflexes. But that was my personal, like, the first full motion video game of any kind that I remember seeing was Time Traveler. Like, and I know that was an arcade game. So my first exposure to it was not on the home console. But Mark, why don't you tell us about your first exposure to full motion video games?
All right. First time I was hanging out with my friend Frank, and first time I went over his house, he's like, yeah, come on over, we'll hang out. So he had a Sega CD. Which I was like, wow, you have a Sega CD, this is awesome. And I knew about the full motion video, but I didn't know anyone that owned one.
I didn't know anyone that owned one growing up.
And the first game he had was Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch Make My Video.
What a terrible first choice.
I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, we could make your own video, and they graded it, how well you did. And we played this for hours and on end. Like, we were just like blown away by playing this game. I mean, for personally, I enjoy playing this game. Like, I know a lot of people won't. They'll be like, "You're fucking crazy. What the hell are you doing? Are you drunk?" But nah, this game it has a definitely nostalgia in my heart, and yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, that was the first experience I had with it, and I still play it from time to time.
I have 2 questions for you. Number 1, will you please do a live stream on that, because I would love to watch that.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. The second question is, did you feel it? Feel the vibration?
Of course.
Okay, so since Mark mentioned, Mark mentioned Marky Mark, his first exposure to a console-based FMV game, I wanted to talk about the first time that something like that came into my neck of the woods. And that would actually be in this exact magazine, in Turbo Play, the one with Bonk on the cover, where they talk about it came from the desert. They've got this full, 2-page spread, and it actually continues in the back, and they've got all these pictures of them filming it. They're interviewing the actor, they're interviewing the director and everything. And it's really cool. We were looking at this actually right before we shot this, just looking at what the director was saying as far as how the process of this worked and how they were doing it. And basically, what they did to get this to actually work, since this was one of the very first Turbo CD games, before they came out with the System 3.0 card, which had additional RAM, which it badly needed to be able to actually get CD games to really work. The full motion video in this isn't really full motion video. It's basically an illusion. It's a series of frames where they kind of set it up in sequence, almost like it's stop motion animation. So it's basically tricking your eyes into thinking that it is FMV. It looks very similar to it, but at the end of the day, it's not like Night Trap, for example, where it's actually, they shot people on location like a movie. For this, they put people basically against the blue screen with props, then they'd shoot the background plate separately, then they'd interject the sound and everything. And the way the director describes this is that the Turbo CD would pull all these things, it'd pull the sound file, pull the background, pull the actor, etc. And it would basically assemble all of these things into one sequence. So when the dude's walking down the road or whatever, all of that is it's pulling shit from different sections of the CD-ROM to make it happen. Which is both how the hell were they actually able to do that? With this limited technology. That's actually kind of awesome that they were able to make this work. But again, this is very, very early on in the Turbo City's life cycle. This was within the first couple of games. It might have even been the first game ever that they released for the Turbo City. I don't remember exactly which was the first one, but this was very, very early. This was talking about the Turbo CD, I think before the Turbo CD was out. They were just kind of talking it's coming, this Christmas or whatever. And, until they got that System 3.0 card, when, Lords of Thunder and stuff started coming out, when things really went into high gear, when they were doing what looked like anime, in video games. The FMV in this was definitely pretty lacking, but I actually did get to play the game. I actually did do a live stream of it a ways back, and yeah, the amount of RAM that they've gone on, the color palette leaves a lot to be desired. It makes Night Trap look like a fucking Blu-ray. I mean, it really does. It's really bad, this initial ones. Again, the Turbo City games got better as time went on, but they didn't do a lot of full motion video games. They did a handful, and JB Harold Murder Club, there's a couple Sherlock Holmes games. They didn't really do all that much with actors and stuff in it. A lot of it they just used anime type of things, where it still is full motion video. It's just animated, hand drawn kind of stuff. So that was my first exposure to FMV. I'm gonna use that word loosely because technically it's not, but close enough, on a console. Okay, so we can't talk about FMV games without talking about the elephant in the room. Night Trap, yeah. I mean, it's you cannot mention the heyday of FMV games without that game coming up. It is this kind of happy stain on on the face of gaming from yesteryear. Okay, so my personal experience with Night Trap, I can tell you. Here's what I remember from when I was a kid, because again, I didn't know anyone who had a Sega CD. I knew a kid who had a Genesis, but I didn't know anyone who actually had the CD attachment. I do remember, I think it was my mom saw the thing that was on 60 Minutes about Night Trap and stuff, and how they were, it eventually went to Congress, and they're talking about violence in video games and stuff, and they're blowing it way out of proportion, saying oh, they're doing this to these women and blah 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 blah, and of course they completely exaggerated the truth. And I remember my mom basically pulling me aside and telling me you're not playing that game, and I'm I don't even have a Sega CD, how am I supposed to do that? But I do remember seeing it for rent at my local Hollywood Video.
Yeah.
And I remember the box was the original box, you know, with the hand-drawn chick with the boobs and stuff like that. And I remember I couldn't wait to go over there and look at it. Like, I mean, because this was like forbidden fruit for the first time ever in video games. Like, that made me want to look at it more. Because when I was told I couldn't do it, I was like, oh shit, it's some next level shit over here. Yeah. You know, I just remember looking at the box like, oh, looking at the back like, this is so cool. It's like getting to play a movie. But tell us about the first time, like, you heard about Night Trap, your experience with it, etc. Like the, you know, the mystique and the controversy surrounding it, that kind of stuff.
Oh, unfortunately, I don't really have too much because I never owned it, unfortunately. Okay. It wasn't until recently I picked it up for 3DO. And,
do you remember hearing about it when you were young?
Yeah. I remember reading the reviews and like GamePro and stuff like that, and EGM as well. Okay. And I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. I'm surprised my friend that owned the Sega CD never rented that game. Mm. Out of all the games we've rented, we've never rented Night Trap.
You never rented the most notorious video game.
I don't know why. We rented stupid shit like Space Ace for the Super Nintendo, but nothing like, we never got Night Trap. I don't know why. But
do you remember how long ago was the first time you played Night Trap?
Probably like 2 years ago.
Okay, that's about the same for me. Like the first time I sat down and played it is when I streamed it.
Yeah.
Last time on the air, like that was, which I could be wrong, but at the time that we checked into this, that was the first time someone had ever live streamed that game on YouTube.
Yeah, you're telling me.
Yeah, it had been done on Twitch before, but no one had ever done it because YouTube streaming was just starting out.
Yeah.
And I just did a search, like, you know, Sega Night Trap live stream, and I came up with jack shit. And I was like, holy shit, we're actually going to be the first people to do this. And yeah, I mean, like, as far as like my first experience with it, I mean, it's a lot different than I thought it would be. Like, you know, as far as like the QuickTime events, like I knew that was going to be part of it, but I mean, you know, is it like the huge, you know, gigantic, you know, controversial thing that it was hyped to be? No, like not even close. Like it would be like a low-grade PG-13 movie if it came out today. But there is something kind of neat about the game when you play it. Like it's very nostalgic just because of the way it plays. Like it throws you back to when Sega was like hitting on all cylinders. Yeah. You know, just the kind of the dun 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 with the music and everything when the guys come in. Dun 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 dun. I mean, there's kind of something cool about it. Like it's. I mean, if I had to pitch someone, Night Trap in one sentence, it's like the best, worst game you've ever played.
Yeah.
Like, it really is. Like, it's you know, this is coming from the two of the hosts of Dirt Flicks. You know, again, we watch bad movies on purpose. It's basically like playing a dirt movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it really is. Like, if that was a movie, we would watch that on Dirt Flicks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that would be our bread and butter. So, that's kind of our thing. So, I guess we're bad people to ask about that because we throw ourselves on that grenade intentionally.
Yeah.
Because we're fucking nuts. So, you know, but final words about Night Trap?
It's still a good game. And if you guys haven't checked it out, you can download it on PS4 and Xbox One.
Yeah.
And check it out in HD. Well, technically, not HD, but
they've really cleaned it up from what we understand. You know, because you're not limited by like a 16-bit processor's color palette. It's got all the colors and everything, so it's gonna look a lot better than even the 3DO version, which, you know, that was the best version by far, because you got the bigger window and everything. But yeah, if you want to play it in, like, I guess the way it was originally intended before it had to get nerfed down to fit on the systems, you can download the digital copy and check it out.
Definitely. And definitely don't buy from the scalpers for the limited run key.
No, don't do that.
Crazy.
That's stupid. Just download it. If you just want to play it, download it and play it. And, like, I mean, all the people who don't have it probably have never played it anyway, so it's just like, you're going to be disappointed. So it's like, don't waste your money on that bullshit. Pay your 20 or 30 bucks or whatever, just play it, get it out of your system. Yeah. So another little snippet that I want to throw in, a special shout out to a guy I went to high school with, Mr. John Fisher. I saw this at his house when I was probably 14 years old. It was a little game called The Seventh Guest, which was on PC, and he and his twin brother Steve actually had a pretty good, well-built PC, a lot of horsepower and stuff. And that was the first time I recall seeing a full-motion video game that wasn't in an arcade. Like, I actually saw this on their computer, and like it had the little sequences where you're looking through the house and it's all spooky and shit, and the guy like puking the freaking CG or hand-drawn goo and all this other crap, and definitely very early on in the FMV's life cycle. But I remember thinking like it was really cool because even though it was just a little point-and-click adventure, you were like commanding somebody to walk around, which I thought was really cool. And later in my high school years, I actually got myself a decent home PC, and I got to borrow a game from a buddy of mine that would be Phantasmagoria. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that. Sort of controversial game. When it came out, there was like they call it a rape scene. I think that might be a little exaggerated. It's not overly graphic or anything like that. I've seen worse stuff in PG-13 movies, so it's not by today's standards. It's not so much. I can see why it would be controversial back then, but when you look at it today, it's like, yeah, so what? But I think the death scenes are a lot more controversial when the dude's basically trying to kill his wife and her head splits in two, and
super graphic too.
Oh, very graphic, but a really, really cool story. Kind of like a mystery novel, almost like a Stephen King novel, kind of unfolding as you're kind of learning like the history of the house and all this other crap as this lady kind of explores things, and definitely exciting. I remember kind of digging. I never played the sequel, The Puzzle of Flesh. Did you?
Yeah, I beat it. I just beat it recently.
Is there as much bondage in it as there was shown on the cover?
There's a lot of sex scenes.
Is there really?
Yeah.
So they dialed it up from the first one?
There's not
a lot of fucking?
Not really violence, but yeah, a lot of sex scenes.
Wow. Didn't see that coming. All right.
It's a very fun game.
Like R-rated sex scenes?
Yeah.
Like if this was a movie, it would immediately have a legitimate R rating.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right. Damn, now I gotta play it. Like now I'm interested. All right.
And you can actually get both those games on GOG.com.
Okay.
And
I wouldn't mind playing the sequel.
It was like on sale I had it on my wish list. They were like $5 a piece.
Can't beat that.
Something like that. It was $10 for both of them.
I might have to give that one a whirl.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of like a shooter FMV style game.
I think I know where this is going.
It's Corpse Killer.
Mm-hmm.
It came out on the Sega CD as well as the Sega Saturn and also the Sega CD 32X.
Mm-hmm.
Now I only had a Sega Saturn at the time, and I rented the hell out of that game. I don't know. It's so cheesy.
Did you have the light gun or?
No, I was using the projectile.
Oh, okay.
The little cursor.
Nice.
And I loved that game. It was so corny, but I enjoyed shooting the zombies, and the acting is always corny, but it's always intriguing watching goofy acting back then.
We're gonna have to play it. I've never actually played Corpse Killer.
No?
I think we're gonna have to get like a Menacer, and we're gonna have to play it legit.
Yeah.
Play with an actual light gun.
Oh,
I think that might be fun.
Yeah, because it's not bad with the cursor, because most of the enemies show up at the same spot anyway, so you're not really going a whole moving around all the time, but it's still fun.
One player or two players?
I think it is 2 players. I can't remember.
I seem to think that it is. I could be wrong. I could have sworn. Didn't James Rolfe and Mike Matai do that?
I can't remember.
I don't want to call out other YouTubers here. I could have sworn that they did. It was too. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. We're gonna have to play that sometime because we're gonna do it on the CD32X.
Yeah.
Take 10% more RAM and get it in all its glory.
Which I was actually watching a YouTube video. The guy was comparing the Sega CD 32X version with the Sega Saturn, and they were basically identical.
That doesn't shock me.
Yeah, they're the video quality was on par.
Yeah,
which is pretty interesting at the time, because you think why did they go to the Sega Saturn if the 32X could do the same thing?
When you look at the actual specs on the 32X, as far as its graphical processing ability, it was above basically everything else in its generation, even the 3DO. When you look at it on paper, did it execute that as well as the 3DO? No, but if you look at the actual numbers as far as what it's truly capable of, it was more advanced. That little thing was more advanced than the entire 3DO system as far as graphical horsepower. So Sega just never really learned to really harness it. That was the problem. They didn't put enough money into development for it, but yeah, that doesn't surprise me that it was, basically on par with the Saturn in the end.
Yeah, because I thought there would be definitely differences. I figured the Saturn one would be
bigger system, more RAM, more VRAM. Yeah,
but they were basically the same.
Basically, more or less, yeah.
So, and ironically, I still don't own Corpse Killer on the Sega CD. The
Sega Saturn.
Yeah, the Sega Saturn.
Yeah. So one final note that I definitely feel that we cannot leave out, because this is this in my opinion is full motion video done correctly, with respect to injecting into a video game, and that would be the initial sequence in the first Resident Evil game.
Yeah.
Because the video looked clear. It was borderline DVD quality. It was nice and clear. Had the actors, still plenty of cheese. You know, when they're going in there with, you know, Wesker and Chris Redfield and Joe Valentine and Barry and everything, and yeah, it's tons of cheese. And the big controversy, I guess, surrounding it, that like they kind of nerfed down the version of that intro that we got, because I don't know if you've ever actually seen the Japanese version, like the uncut intro.
No.
It is light years beyond what we got in the director's cut. It is so much more violent and gory. When they're shooting the dog, there's like blood and shit spraying all over the place. The first victim the dog takes down, dude, that guy gets fucked up by that dog. I mean, the dog is like ripping his arm off and shit.
Jeez.
It's if you ever YouTube the guys, go and look for that shit. Like where there's one where they do it side by side with the director's cut. Oh, it's so much longer. It's like an extra minute or so of like just pure gore. So they were gonna restore that when they went back and re-released the Resident Evil thing, but they lost the tapes, Capcom or whatever. Yeah. They can't find the original video source. Hopefully they find it someday, or hopefully somebody finds out a way to extract it from the original disc, and, you know, clean it up and put it whatever, because I'd like to see it restored. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, it's already a mature rated game. Like, why are we worried about the gore here?
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, like, when you look at that, and even today, when you look at that opening sequence, it holds up. I mean, it's still clear. You know, the color palette's good. It's the PlayStation. It's got tons more horsepower than the Sega Genesis had. So that to me was like, okay, this is a full motion video done correctly. This actually looks good, and it's helping tell the story. So that about wraps this one up, I guess. We want to thank everyone so much for stopping by and kind of hopping along here on this little trip down memory lane. Just talking about our memories with full motion video. But you've heard what the Game Shark and I here seem to think about FMV video games, our exposure to it, our memories, you know, both good and bad. But we want to hear what you think. Why don't you guys leave us a comment below. Tell us about your first exposure to FMV games, what you remember about it, good or bad, what lived up to the hype, what didn't live up to the hype. You know, do you have any of these games today? Did you experience them as an adult, basically like I did? Like, you know, I didn't start playing Sega CD games till I was a grown man. And, you know, just tell us your experiences with it. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Definitely.
So, but thank you everyone so much for stopping by, and I guess we'll see you next time.
See you guys.